Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Histories. Imagine the roar of 40,000 voices under a brilliant Mediterranean sun, the gleam of marble temples and athletes with the bodies of gods competing for eternal glory. It is the popular, romanticized image of the ancient Olympic Games, a golden age of sportsmanship and pure athletic pursuit that most people have. But the real life of a competitor was far more visceral, grueling, and dangerous than the legends suggest. It was a world of biological endurance, religious fervor, and mechanical violence, where the cost of a false start was a public whipping. So tonight, we will leave the legends behind and see what it was really like. We will explore the gritty process of debridement with a bronze strigil, the high-tension physics of the Highsplex starting gate, and the bone-crushing reality of the combat pits. If you enjoy our journey through time, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your current location and time in the comments. The year is 776 BC. You are standing within the Altis, the sacred grove of Olympia, located in the fertile valley of the Alpheus River in the Peloponnese. This is not the sprawling complex of stone and marble it will one day become. It is a sanctuary defined by its ancient trees and a series of modest altars. The air is thick with the scent of burning poplar wood and the heavy, musky odor of livestock brought for sacrifice. At this point in history, the Olympic Games are not a multi-day spectacle of diverse athletics, but a singular, concentrated religious festival dedicated to honoring Zeus. Everything culminates in a single day and a single event. The stadion. You observe the boundary markers of the track, a rectangular stretch of leveled earth precisely 600 Greek feet in length. There are no stone starting blocks yet, only a simple line scratched into the dirt. The physical mechanics of this race are grueling and precise. The athletes do not use the sophisticated starting stances of later eras. They stand upright, toes gripping the soil. Among the men lining the start is Corribos of Elis. He is not a professional soldier or a career athlete, but a cook from the nearby city-state. His presence here is a requirement of the sacred truce, a cessation of hostilities that allows for the safe passage of pilgrims. You note the visual uniformity of the competitors. Every man stands completely nude, a practice intended to symbolize a unified Greek identity and to emphasize the raw mechanics of the masculine form. The sun beats down on skin coated in a thin layer of olive oil, which serves to protect the dermis from the heat and the abrasive dust of the track. This nudity is a cultural signifier, stripping away rank and wealth to leave only the biological capability of the individual. The silence of the Altis is absolute, a vacuum created by the anticipation of the gathered crowds. Then the stillness is shattered, and the sharp, brassy vibration of a single trumpet blast echoes across the sanctuary, the signal to begin. Corribos moves with a sudden explosive exertion of the quadriceps and calves. The stadion is a sprint of approximately 192 meters, requiring a balance of power and high-velocity turnover. You track the motion of his arms, which drive aggressively to counter the rotational force of his hips. The feet of the runners churn the dry earth, creating a localized cloud of particulate matter that coats the back of the throat with a dry mineral taste. There is no strategy of pacing in the stadion. It is a mechanical output of maximum effort. Corribos maintains a forward lean, his center of gravity optimized for the short duration of the dash. As he crosses the finish line, he becomes the first recorded Olympic victor in history. This victory is not merely a sports achievement. In 776 BCC, it is a divine selection. By winning, Corribos is viewed as having been favored by Zeus himself, his physical success serving as a manifestation of arete or excellence. The immediate reward is humble, a sprig of olive cut from a sacred tree with a golden sickle. Yet the social implications are massive. The name of Corribos will be inscribed in the first list of victors, beginning a chronological record that will serve as the backbone of Greek timekeeping. The logistics of the event are governed by the Hellenodikai, the judges from Elis, who ensure that religious protocols are followed with bureaucratic rigor. You see them moving through the crowd, their purple robes a stark contrast to the dust-covered athletes. They oversee the distribution of the sacrificial meat, which reinforces the communal bond of the participants. The entire proceedings are a blend of technical physical performance and rigid theological structure. The sweat cooling on the skin of Corybos marks the end of this inaugural competition, but the prestige of his win begins to radiate outward. As the single race at Olympia grows into a circuit, the games expand across the Greek world. By the mid-6th century BC, the administrative complexity of the Greek athletic system underwent a radical expansion, transitioning from the singular event at Olympia into a rigorous 4-year logistical rhythm known as the Periodos. This circuit functioned as a synchronized mechanism, ensuring that the Hellenic world remained in a perpetual state of athletic and religious mobilization. The schedule was governed by a precise chronological hierarchy. Every 4 years, the Olympic Games remained the apex of the cycle, but the gaps between these gatherings were systematically filled by 3 other major festivals. In the 3rd year of each Olympiad, you observe the procession ascending the winding sacred way at Delphi for the Pythian Games. Dedicated to Apollo, these games integrated musical and poetic competitions alongside traditional athletics, reinforcing the god's dominion over both the arts and physical prowess. The administrative demand of this cycle meant that regional calendars had to be perfectly aligned, a massive feat of early bureaucratic coordination. Every city-state was required to track the lunar cycles with absolute precision, to ensure their athletes arrived at the sanctuary of Apollo on the correct date. Logistically, the Periodos required an unprecedented level of intercity cooperation. To facilitate this, the Echiaria, the sacred truce, was enacted into law. This was not a cessation of all Greek warfare, but a strictly enforced administrative protocol that guaranteed safe passage for all athletes, spectators, and official embassies traveling to and from the sites. You see the heralds, known as spondophoroi, departing from the sanctuary gates, their presence signaling the commencement of the truce. If a city-state violated this protocol by attacking a traveler or initiating a siege during the games, they faced immediate disqualification and heavy silver fines, which were diverted into the sanctuary treasuries. The air in these sanctuaries is often stratified by the thick, sweet scent of frankincense and the pungent odor of livestock being readied for the hecatomb sacrifices, an olfactory marker of the wealth flowing into these neutral zones. The sheer volume of traffic necessitated temporary camps, markets, and water management systems to be established months in advance of the opening ceremonies. The biennial games at Corinth and Nemea provided the necessary density to the circuit. The Isthmian Games, held at the narrow neck of land connecting the Peloponnese to central Greece, occurred every 2 years in honor of Poseidon. Their location made them the most commercially accessible, drawing vast crowds from the maritime trade routes. Simultaneously, the Nemean Games, also held every 2 years, mirrored the Olympic program but were dedicated to Zeus at his sanctuary in the Argolid. For an athlete, the ultimate achievement was to be crowned a Perionikes, a victor of the circuit requiring a consecutive win at all 4 major sites. This feat demanded a degree of spatial and temporal management that governed every aspect of an athlete's life. They moved along established dust-choked roads, their journey dictated by the shifting moon phases and the terrestrial demands of the biennial schedule. These men were not merely sports stars. They were logistical travelers navigating a complex web of maritime and overland routes spanning hundreds of miles across the Mediterranean world. While the prestige of these victories was immense, the tangible rewards remained strictly symbolic, reinforcing the religious purity of the competition. At the conclusion of each event, the victors were awarded specific botanical wreaths, each meticulously harvested according to local tradition. At Olympia, it was the Katinos, a wreath of wild olive. At Delphi, the victor received the laurel. In the coastal atmosphere of the isthmus, the prize was originally a wreath of pine, while at Nemea, the victor was crowned with celery. You observe the physical manifestation of this triumph, the texture of a dried celery wreath against a victor's brow. See the brittle, desiccated stalks pressing into the skin, leaving temporary indentations that mark the transition from athlete to hero. The dehydration of the plant matter serves as a stark contrast to the sweat-slicked, oil-rubbed skin of the competitor. This standardization of the periodos transformed the disparate Greek city-states into a structured athletic network. The administrative success of the 6th century BC ensured that at any given time an athlete was either traveling to a competition or recovering from one. With the schedule set, the focus shifts to the grueling physical preparation of the human machine. The transition from the administrative order of the periodos to the physical reality of the 5th century BC gymnasium is marked by a shift in atmosphere from the political to the biological. You enter the courtyard of the gymnasium, a structure that functions as the dual engine of Greek society. Here, the architectural layout dictates a rigorous schedule where the development of the mind and the hardening of the body occur in parallel. You observe the epithebes moving between the palestra, the wrestling ground, and the extra, seated areas where philosophers and rhetoricians conduct lectures. This stratification of space ensures that the citizen athlete is as technically proficient in dialectics as he is in the pankration. The air carries the heavy vegetal aroma of pressed olives, a scent that defines the preparation phase of every competitor. Before an athlete may even set foot on the training sands, a specific dermatological protocol is mandated. You see a young man begin the process of aleifine, the application of oil. This is not for aesthetics, but serves a critical technical function. The thick coating of olive oil acts as a barrier against the elements, preventing the excessive loss of internal fluids, while simultaneously shielding the pores from the inevitable ingress of dust and debris. To complete this protective layer, fine sand, often imported for its specific texture, is tossed over the oiled limbs. This combination creates a gritty, viscous paste that assists in thermoregulation during high-intensity exertion. You reach out and touch the skin of a competitor. It feels dense and armored, the sand providing the necessary friction for wrestling grips that would otherwise be impossible on slick, perspiring skin. This physical conditioning is the culmination of a bureaucratic and temporal commitment. You are informed that these men have been in localized training for at least 10 months, a standardized requirement to ensure the quality of the Panhellenic spectacle. However, the final vetting process is even more stringent. You follow a group of these athletes as they depart their home city-states to arrive in Elyssus, precisely times 4 weeks before the games begin. This mandatory 30-day residency allows the Hellenodikai, the local judges, to observe the athletes in a controlled environment. Here, the selection is finalized. Those who cannot maintain the pace or who exhibit technical flaws are disqualified before reaching the sacred precinct of Olympia. The Elyssus training camp is a filter of pure performance. As the sun reaches its zenith, the training session concludes, leading to the most distinctive ritual of the Greek athletic complex. The athletes move toward the apotherium to begin the process of debridement. Because the mixture of oil, sweat, and sand has now become a clotted, abrasive sludge that traps heat and bacteria, it must be removed with mechanical precision. Each man carries a strigil, a curved bronze or iron scraper with a hollowed-out channel. You watch the rhythmic motion of the tool as it is drawn across the bicep and down the thigh. There is a distinct metallic rasping sound, a consistent grating slide of metal against the grit-laden skin. With each pass of the strigil, a ribbon of gloios, the waste product of sweat and oil, is collected in the curve of the blade and flicked onto the ground. This scraping is more than mere hygiene. It is a clinical necessity. The accumulation of organic matter in the Mediterranean heat would otherwise lead to rapid bacterial growth and skin degradation. You observe the skin beneath the sludge emerge flushed and raw. The blood vessels dilated from the combined effects of the exercise and the vigorous exfoliation. The smell of the gymnasium changes in this moment, shifting from the clean scent of fresh oil to the pungent, sour odors of human exhaustion and the metallic tang of the bronze tools. Once the gloios is removed, a final rinse of cold water from the stone basins closes the pores, completing the cycle of physical maintenance. Through this process, the body is treated as a piece of high-performance equipment, refined through months of academic and physical discipline, and maintained through specific chemical and mechanical interventions. The athlete has moved from a raw subject of the state to a polished instrument of competition. The grit of the elite training grounds is washed away, leaving behind a form that is aerodynamically and thermally prepared for the terminal phase of the circuit. Cleaned and prepared, the athletes step onto the track where technology meets speed. They stand ready, their skin glowing under the Mediterranean sun, the final transformation from student and trainee to Olympic contender complete. The air is thick with anticipation as the dust of the gymnasium gives way to the hallowed grounds of the stadium. The transition from the month of regulatory purging in Elis to the stadium at Olympia necessitates a shift in psychological state. You are no longer an apprentice of the gyms. You are a biological engine subject to the rigid laws of ancient mechanics. The stadium track, a level expanse of packed clay and sand, is dominated by a device of sophisticated tension and release known as the Hysplex. You observe the structure, two vertical wooden posts anchored into the stone sills, with two horizontal ropes stretched across the width of the lane. These cables are held under high tension by torsion springs, a primitive but effective precursor to ballistic artillery engineering. The officials, known for their uncompromising adherence to protocol, supervise the winding of the strings. The physics are simple. The tension must be uniform to ensure that no single runner gains a microsecond of advantage through structural failure. There are exactly 192 meters of track ahead, and the mechanism is the gatekeeper of that distance. You take your place behind the Hysplex. The mechanism creates a physical barrier at both the knees and the chest, forcing a stationary, upright posture. This is the technical solution to the problem of the false start. You look to the periphery of the starting line, where the Mastigophoroi stand. These are the public whip-bearers, officials designated to enforce the sanctity of the start through immediate corporal punishment. Their presence is a reminder that the cost of an anticipatory reflex, a nervous twitch that releases the Hysplex prematurely, is a public flogging. The wooden rods they carry are not symbolic. They are tools of immediate behavioral correction designed to maintain the integrity of the Olympic schedule. The air carries the dry, desiccated scent of the stadium sand, mixed with the acrid smell of the sweat now cooling on your illed skin. The sudden thwack of the wooden Hysplex bar hitting the sand signals the collapse of the barrier. The sound is sharp, a percussive impact that resonates through the soles of your feet. With the tension released, your body converts its stored potential energy into kinetic motion. The lane is approximately 192 meters long, a distance known as the stage. You are participating in a sequence of events where the most elite athletes aim for the triastes, the winning of 3 different racing disciplines in a single cycle. In the hoplitodromos, the mechanical requirements change. You are no longer unencumbered. The rules dictate that you must carry a heavy bronze-faced shield, or aspius, weighing approximately 15 to 20 pounds. You observe the competitors adjusting the porpax or arm grip, ensuring the weight is distributed across the forearm to prevent the shield from dropping. A dropped shield results in immediate disqualification. The race is as much a test of upper body endurance as it is of lower body speed. This race serves as the bridge between athletic display and military utility. You contemplate the historical precedent set by Leonidas of Rhodes. Over 4 consecutive Olympiads between 164 and 152 BC, Leonidas secured 12 individual titles. His success was not merely a feat of speed, but of adaptability. The sun reaches its zenith, baking the stadium floor until the heat distortion blurs the lines of the track. You feel the grit of the sand beneath your toenails and the drag of the friction as you complete the final lap. The mechanical precision of the gates and the violent punishments of the Mastigophoroi have ensured a clean contest. However, the stadium remains a site of shifting demands. The focus on horizontal velocity and the rapid turnover of the legs begins to fade as the officials clear the track. Speed gives way to raw power as we move from the track to the throwing pits. The transition from the sprinting track to the throwing and jumping events represents a shift from pure velocity to the application of complex mechanical leverage. In the 5th century BCC, Greek athleticism was not merely a display of raw strength, but a practical study in the physics of propulsion. The central area of the stadium, the pit of softened earth known as the scammer, serves as the laboratory for these experiments in momentum. You observe the athletes preparing their equipment, each tool designed to bypass human physiological limitations through the clever application of mass and rotation. The long jump, or halma, is perhaps the most technically demanding of these pursuits. Unlike the modern iteration of the sport, the 5th century jumper does not rely solely on the explosive power of the quadriceps. Instead, they carry halteres, weights made of stone or lead, typically weighing between 2 and 9 pounds each. These objects are shaped like telephone receivers or simple arched weights with finger grips. As you watch the jumper accelerate toward the balbus, the fixed stone starting line that defines the boundary of the legitimate jump, you see the weights swinging in a rhythmic arc. The balbus is an unforgiving threshold. To cross it before the launch is to invalidate the effort entirely. Upon reaching the point of takeoff, the athlete thrusts the halteres forward to gain initial momentum. At the apex of the flight, the jumper forcefully throws the weights backward. The mechanical result is a shift in the jumper center of gravity and an increase in the forward extension of the legs. This counterpropulsion allows the athlete to remain airborne for a fraction of a second, longer than gravity would otherwise permit. The heavy thud of lead weights hitting the dirt behind the athlete signals the conclusion of the flight, a sound that underscores the literal weight of the physics at play. Adjacent to the jump pit, the javelin throwers engage in a different manipulation of kinetic energy. The Greek javelin, or akon, is a slim shaft of elder wood, but its effectiveness depends on the ankyle, a leather strap wrapped tightly around the center of the shaft. You observe the thrower inserting 2 fingers into the loop of the ankyle. As the javelin is released, the uncoiling of this strap imparts a rapid spin on the shaft. This rotation creates a gyroscopic effect, stabilizing the flight path and significantly increasing the distance by reducing air resistance. It is a refinement of ballistic technology that allows a relatively light projectile to maintain a linear trajectory over considerable distances. The scent in the air is a mixture of tilled earth and the bitter, tanning oils of the leather straps, a sensory byproduct of the athlete's mechanical preparation. The throwing events conclude with the discus, an event defined by the structural integrity of the equipment and the standardization of the effort. Archaeologists have recovered numerous bronze discs from this era, varying in weight but consistent in their aerodynamic profile. In the 5th century BCC, the rules of the competition are rigid. Each athlete is permitted to use 3 bronze discs. Unlike modern multi-stage qualifications, the scoring system is binary and final. Only the best effort is recorded, and the remaining 2 serve merely as opportunities to refine the arc of release. The thrower stands on a slightly elevated wooden platform, pivoting the body to transform rotational torque into linear velocity. When the bronze disc leaves the hand, it cuts through the air with a distinct metallic hum before impacting the scammer with a sharp, percussive force. Every action within this field is governed by the balbus and the rigid boundaries of the pit. The athletes are not merely competing against one another, they are competing against the physical constraints of the ancient world, using metallurgy and leatherwork to extend the reach of the human frame. The precision of the throwing and jumping events reveals a culture obsessed with the technical mastery of the physical plane, where every inch of gain is bought through the calculated coordination of mass, rotation, and force. The calm, methodical nature of these field events provides a stark contrast to the spectacles that follow. From the calculated physics of the field, we enter the chaotic violence of the combat pits. The transition is jarring. You leave behind the silent measurements and the rhythmic thud of the halters for the sound of snapping bone and the roar of a crowd hungry for blood. The engineers of momentum become the architects of agony. As the sun begins to tilt toward the horizon, the dust of the scammer settles, but the atmosphere thickens with a different kind of tension. The mastery of tools is replaced by the mastery of the fist and the chokehold. We move now from the physics of the tool to the physiology of the fighter. Prepare yourself, for the calm of the field is over. The transition from the refined physics of the field events to the heavy combat sports marks a shift from the pursuit of measured distance to the endurance of physical trauma. By the 4th century BC, CCCC, the Panhellenic circuit has codified these spectacles into three distinct disciplines: the pale, or wrestling, the pack, or boxing, and finally the pankration. You step away from the balbis and move toward the scammer. This is a dugout pit of soft earth where the technical application of force becomes a matter of survival. The air hanging over this square of churned soil is heavy with the scent of oxidized blood and the bitter musk of scorched olive oil. In the heavy events, the human body is no longer a delivery system for a discus or javelin, it is the weapon and the target simultaneously. You observe the boxing matches first, noting the total absence of the logistical constraints found in modern sport. There are no padded corners, no timed rounds, and no weight classes to ensure parity between competitors. A smaller, more agile pugilist may find himself enduring the unrelenting pressure of a man twice his mass. This is not a game of points, it is a test of what a man can withstand before he breaks. The primary equipment consists of hind tees. These are long strips of ox-hide leather, roughly 4 meters in length, wrapped meticulously around the knuckles and wrists. These are not designed to soften the impact for the recipient. They are intended to protect the small bones of the striker's hand, allowing for harder, more repetitive blows to the cranium and torso. You hear the wet slap of a leather-wrapped fist against bone, a sound followed immediately by the sharp exhale of a fighter losing his wind. Because there is no point system, a match only concludes when a participant is unable to continue or signals submission by raising a single index finger. When a boxing match reaches a prolonged stalemate, the referee may intervene to invoke the climax. This is a technical procedure of maximum mutuality. Each fighter stands stationary and receives an undefended blow from his opponent. The toss of a coin determines who strikes first. You watch as a fighter steals his jaw, arms lowered by rule, and absorbs the full anatomical force of a weighted fist. This cycle continues until one man collapses. The objective is not grace, but the demonstration of carteria, the absolute capacity to endure pain without concession. From the boxing square, you move to the site of the pankration, a term literally translating to all power. Introduced to the Olympic program in 648 BC. By the 4th century, it has become the most prestigious and hazardous of all athletic endeavors. The rule set is stark in its brevity. Biting is forbidden, as is the gouging of the eyes, nose, or mouth with the fingers. Beyond these two prohibitions, every anatomical manipulation is legal. You witness the laxtisma, the specialized kicking technique, where a fighter strikes the stomach or groin of his opponent with the ball of the foot. Unlike the wrestlers who compete for 3 throws to the ground, the pancratiasts continue the struggle on the floor. This is catopancratiast or ground fighting, where the objective is to force a submission through joint locks or strangulation. Technique in the pankration is a matter of ruthless efficiency. You observe a competitor executing a heel hook, twisting the opponent's leg until the ligaments of the knee reach their mechanical breaking point. The sounds are distinct, the rasping breath of a man caught in a tracheal choke, and the thud of knees hitting the hard, packed clay. And serious victory is achieved through knockout submission, or, legal under the statutes of the game, the death of the opponent. Here, the internal organs are subjected to immense pressure. Records from the period describe fighters dying from ruptured spleens or the sheer exhaustion of a match that lasts into the evening. In the rare case of a posthumous victory, such as that of Arishon of Phigalia, the crown is placed upon the corpse of the man who refused to submit even as his life escaped him. You see the officials holding long wooden switches, or rhabdoi, which they use to lash any fighter who attempts an illegal gouge or bite. The violence is sanctioned, but it must remain within the technical parameters of the sport. As the sun begins its descent, casting long, ochre shadows across the gore-stained earth of the scammer, the intensity of the atmosphere shifts. The crowd's focus moves from the grit and dust of the pit toward the wide, open expanse of the stadium's outer limits. The smell of blood remains, but it is now joined by the stench of scorched wood and animal sweat. The violence of the pit is mirrored by the high-speed danger of the hippodrome. The transition from the blood-slick sand of the pancration to the expansive majesty of the hippodrome marks a shift from the individual struggle of flesh to the calculated projection of wealth and mechanical precision. By the 4th century BC, the equestrian events have evolved into the supreme exhibition of capital in the Hellenic world. You stand amidst a crowd of 40,000, observing the complex layout of the racing circuit, which stretches roughly 600 meters in length. The sheer scale of the arena is a prerequisite for the logistics of the quadriga, the 4-horse chariot race that serves as the crown jewel of the Olympic program. Unlike the combat sports, where a man's survival depends on his own marrow and sinew, this is an industry of track-it investment. You direct your attention to the starting line, where the aphesis system is currently being engaged. This staggered starting mechanism is a marvel of 4th century engineering, designed to ensure fairness across a wide field of competitors. The gates are arranged in a dynamic prow-like shape, a V formation where the chariots on the outer wings are released first. As they reach the line of the chariots further inward, subsequent gates drop in a synchronized mechanical sequence. This staggering prevents a lethal bottleneck at the initial acceleration, allowing the frantic energy of up to 40 teams to converge into a linear flow. You hear the rhythmic clacking of the bronze mechanisms and the heavy thud of the starting bars hitting the dry earth. The air is suddenly dominated by the sharp, acidic scent of horse sweat and the alkaline dust kicked up by hundreds of hooves. As the final gates fall, the silence of anticipation is obliterated. You witness the thunderous vibration of 40 chariots hitting the first turn, a physical resonance that travels through the soles of your feet and rattles the very cage of your ribs. The quadriga requires more than just speed. It demands a violent navigation of physics. The driver, often a hired professional or a slave, stands precariously on a light wooden floorboard, his weight braced against the leather reins. He must manage 4 horses, the inner pair yoked to the pole, the outer 2, the Cyrophore, tethered by traces to provide the pivoting power necessary for the nas, the treacherous turning post. At this high velocity, the centrifugal force threatens to shatter the thin axle trees, and the risk of nausea, chariot wreck, is constant. However, the socio-economic reality of the race is dictated by the ownership of the livestock, not the hand on the reins. In the official records of the Hellenodikai, the drivers, despite their skill and the genuine peril of their labor, remain largely anonymous. It is the owners, those who possess the capital to breed, train, and transport these elite Athenian and Thessalian stallions, who are declared the official Olympic champions. This distinction allows for a historical anomaly in the male-dominated sphere of the Games. You observe the announcement of the victors and note the name of Kiniska of Sparta. As a wealthy daughter of King Archidamus II, she exploited this loophole of ownership to become the first female victor in the history of the Olympics. Her name inscribed in the rolls not for her presence on the track, but for the quality of her stable. To the victor, the rewards are commensurate with the astronomical costs of entry. While the Olive Crown is the symbolic prize at Olympia, the economic ripple effects are felt most keenly in cities like Athens. You observe a successful Athenian owner overseeing the transport of his winnings, 140 amphorae of sacred olive oil. These massive terracotta vessels, decorated with the image of Athena, are not merely ceremonial. They represent a liquid fortune, a commodity that can be traded or sold across the Mediterranean. The oil cements the owner's status within the upper echelons of the Pantacotia Medimnoi, the highest wealth class. The chariots gradually slow, their wooden wheels clicking as the tension of the race dissipates into the settling dust. The spectacle of the hippodrome, with its high-stakes prestige and mechanical ingenuity, highlights the profound intersection of sport and state treasury. Yet, this pursuit of glory through wealth has a darker corollary. As you exit the hippodrome toward the sacred altis, you pass a row of bronze statues, the Zanes. These monuments were funded by the heavy fines levied against those who attempted to buy their way to victory through bribery rather than breeding or brilliance. While winners gained oil and glory, those who cheated faced a permanent, stony shame. Behind the glamour of the four-horse teams and the massive wealth of the owners, these silent bronze figures stand as a warning. Success at the Olympics was meant to be a reflection of divine favor and excellence, not merely a transaction. As the sun sets over the stadium, the shadows of the Zanes lengthen across the path, a reminder that in the ancient world your legacy was as durable as the bronze or stone it was carved upon. By the 3rd century BC, the aesthetic and political landscape of Olympia had transitioned from the spontaneous fervor of local victory to a highly codified judicial system. As you exit the dust and high-stakes chaos of the hippodrome, the atmosphere shifts from the visceral roar of the crowd to the crushing, disciplined silence of the altis. This is the sacred heart of the sanctuary, a walled precinct where the divine met the legal. Within the altis, the treasuries stand in a precise architectural row, housing the offerings of city-states, but your attention is drawn to a different kind of monument, one built not of pride, but of shame. Here, the legal authority of the games is physically manifested in the role of the Hellenodikai, the elite judges of Elis. These men do not merely preside. They are the embodiment of the law of the sanctuary. Their authority is the result of a rigorous 10-month training period, a tenure during which they reside in the Hellenodikaion, immersed in the study of traditional law and the specific regulations of the Olympic Games. You observe them moving through the crowds in their distinct purple robes, their presence a reminder that every movement within the sanctuary is governed by an inflexible ethical framework, and the administrative mechanism of the games begins with the sacred oath. Before the competition commences, you participate in a ritual of radical transparency. In the Boletarion, or council house, athletes and judges alike stand before the statue of Zeus Horkios, the god of oaths. You raise your hand to swear a solemn vow of honor, promising to compete without foul play and to uphold the integrity of the contest. For the judges, the oath is a commitment to impartial decision-making, a pledge that neither bribes nor personal biases will influence the distribution of the olive wreath. This is not a symbolic gesture, it is a legal contract with the divine. The Greeks viewed a breach of this oath as a contamination of the entire sanctuary, necessitating a physical and financial purification process. When an athlete or a judge falters, when a wrestler accepts a bribe to throw a match or a sprinter attempts to jump the start, the mechanism of the Hellenodikai shifts from observation to adjudication. The penalty for violation is a heavy fine, scaled to reflect the gravity of the transgression and the wealth of the offender's city-state. These fines serve a specific structural purpose. They fund the creation of the Zanes. As you walk along the stone path leading to the stadium entrance, you pass a line of bronze statues of Zeus. These are the Zanes, 12 massive figures funded entirely by the penalties levied against rule breakers. They are the permanent public record of those who failed the test of character. On the stone bases of these statues, inscriptions detail the exact nature of the crime and the name of the individual responsible, ensuring their disgrace survives for generations. The cold, unyielding gaze of a bronze Zeus statue follows you as you move toward the stadium, his metallic eyes serving as a deterrent to any who would prioritize victory over virtue. The surface of the bronze is meticulously smooth, reflecting the harsh Mediterranean sun, a testament to the high-quality craftsmanship funded ironically by the proceeds of corruption. The presence of the Zanes transforms the physical space of the altars into a psychological landscape of consequence. One cannot enter the arena without passing the bronze evidence of past failures. The technical focus of the Zanes was not merely punishment, but the reinforcement of the Hellenodikai's power over the sacred heart of Olympia. The altis and its surrounding structures, including the intricate treasuries, were maintained through this rigid stratification of law and religion. You see the scribes recording the financial transactions on marble stelae, the sound of the chisel against stone echoing the finality of the judge's verdict, the smell of burning incense from the nearby Temple of Zeus. mingles with the metallic tang of the bronze casting pits where new zanes are forged when the law is broken. Every facet of the participant's life, from their physical condition during the mandatory 30-day training period in Elis to their conduct on the track, is subject to the scrutiny of the Hellenodikai. This bureaucratic oversight ensures that the games remain a closed system, protected from the external political volatility of the Hellenistic kingdoms. The law of the sanctuary is absolute, creating a sanctuary of order in a world of increasing complexity. For a millennium, these laws held until a new empire changed the gods themselves. The transition from public record to systematic erasure begins not with a sudden collapse, but with a series of administrative adjustments and theological pivots. By AD 393, the religious landscapes of the Mediterranean have shifted irrevocably under the reign of Emperor Theodosius I. You observe the architectural reality of the Altis, where the once vibrant sanctuary of Olympia now operates under the weight of an imperial mandate. Theodosius, a staunch adherent to Nicene Christianity, views the quadrennial gathering not as a celebration of human excellence, but as a relic of heterodoxy that must be purged to unify the Roman Empire's spiritual identity. The Edict of Silence is a legal instrument, a codification of prohibition that treats the ancient rituals as criminal acts. You see the scribe's ink drying on the parchment, effectively criminalizing the very foundations of the Hellenic worldview that had sustained the games for over a millennium. Technical precision dictates the timeline of this decline. While the games were still functional in the late 4th century, the momentum had stalled. You witness the final officially recorded echoes of the athletic tradition in AD 385. In that year, Zopharos of Athens secures his victory in the boxing event, marking the last recorded name to be added to the long lineage of Olympic champions. Zopharos's leather thongs wrapped tightly around his knuckles represent the final application of the pugilist's craft within the formal structure of the ancient games. There is no fanfare for the last champion. Half-fair, the cessation of the records is a matter of bureaucratic strangulation rather than a formal ceremony of closing. In AD 393, the formal decree is issued. Theodosius I bans the festivals, targeting the pagan elements inherent in the sacrifices to Zeus and the honoring of the polytheistic pantheon. This is a systematic dismantling of the social and religious infrastructure. You watch as the marble surfaces of the zanes, the statues of shame funded by fines from athletes of centuries past, remain standing, though their purpose is now obscured. They no longer serve as warnings to competitors, but as vestiges of a defunct legal system. The air is no longer filled with the roar of 40,000 spectators or the heavy scent of roasted sacrificial meat. Instead, you hear only the sound of wind whistling through the empty columns of the Altis, a low, constant vibration against the cold stone. This acoustic void signifies the end of the Greek, pagan, the struggle for glory that defined the classical and Hellenistic eras. Despite the formal imperial ban, the transition is not instantaneous. Historical data indicates that the athletic impulse did not die with the ink of Theodosius's pen. You observe localized competitions persisting at various Mediterranean venues well into the 5th century. These are smaller, clandestine affairs, stripped of their religious significance and relegated to the status of secular entertainment. The technical mastery of the long jump, the discus and the pancration remains in the muscle memory of the people, yet the institutional support, the training facilities, the formal hierarchies, and the protected travel routes is gone. Without the sacred truce, the logistics of hosting an international event become impossible. The decline of the site itself is accelerated by the removal of its treasures. You see the great chryselephantine statue of Zeus, the masterpiece of Phidias, being dismantled and transported to Constantinople, where it will later be destroyed by fire. The technical brilliance of the 5th century BC is liquidated to serve the aesthetics of a new capital. Nature eventually completes the work that the imperial edict started. Over the subsequent centuries, the physical environment of the Peloponnese undergoes a radical shift. The Cladios and Alpheos rivers begin to flood with increasing frequency and severity. You witness the stratification of the landscape. Year by year, The silt and alluvial deposits accumulate across the floor of the Altis, the great temple of Zeus, already damaged by fire and seismic activity, is slowly entombed. The technical reality of siltation means that the ruins are not merely broken, but preserved in a suffocating layer of earth. The height of the columns is gradually reduced as the ground level rises, burying the pedestals, the stadium track, and the remaining bronze fragments under several meters of mud and clay. The site becomes a featureless plain, a pasture where the memory of the games is literally walked over by shepherds who have no knowledge of the geometry of the palaestra beneath their feet. This burial serves as a protective seal, locking the artifacts in an anaerobic environment that prevents total decay. The silver and bronze, the stone inscriptions, and the foundations of the treasury buildings are held in stasis. The abandonment is total. You stand on the surface of this newly formed earth, looking out over a horizon where the gymnasium is no longer visible. The only remaining indicator of the past is the wind, which continues to circulate through the few exposed capitol stones. The silence lasted for 1,500 years, until the earth gave up its secrets. The silence of the Altis endured for 15 centuries. Beneath 5 meters of alluvial silt, deposited by the flooding of the Alpheus and Cladius rivers, the structural remains of the Temple of Zeus and the Pelopion lay encased in an anaerobic tomb. It was not until the 19th century that German archaeological missions began the systematic excavation of the site, stripping back the layers of earth to reveal the limestone foundations of the palaestra. You observe the transition from a sacred landscape to a scientific one. The researchers do not come to pray, but to measure, map, and catalogue the stratification of the soil. The discovery of these ruins ignited a fervor for the Hellenic ideal throughout Europe, shifting the perception of the games from a pagan relic to a blueprint for physical excellence. This rediscovery provided the physical and ideological momentum for the Baron Pierre de Coubertin to propose a revival of the event, culminating in the first modern Olympic Games held in Athens in 1896. This transition marked a fundamental shift, where the ancient games were deeply religious, inextricably tied to the cult of Zeus, and the sacrifice of 100 oxen. The modern games were established as a secular enterprise, grounded in the principles of amateurism and international diplomacy. You stand within the Panathinaikos Stadium in 1896, a horseshoe-shaped structure reconstructed from the remnants of the ancient Lycurgan arena. The technical geometry of the track differs from the ancient dromos. The turns are tighter, and the surface is a mixture of cinders and crushed brick. Among the scheduled events is a race that never existed in the ancient program, the marathon. While the ancient Greeks practiced various distances, such as the stade, the dialos, and the dolichos, a long-distance race of roughly 24 laps, the specific 40-kilometer journey from the plains of Marathon to Athens, was a modern invention. It was proposed by Michel Barrel to commemorate the legendary run of Pheidippides, synthesizing historical myth with modern endurance metrics. In the ancient games, the athletes focused on anaerobic bursts of power or rhythmic endurance within the confines of the stadium. Now, for the first time, the competition spills out into the rugged topography of the Attica countryside. You watch the Greek runner, Spyridon Louis, enter the stadium to claim victory, his lungs burning with the dry, dusty air of the Mediterranean afternoon. The mechanical reality of the 1896 Games reflected a world in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. Spectators arrived by steam-powered railway, and the results were transmitted across the globe via telegraph wires. This technological infrastructure stood in stark contrast to the ancient methodology, where messengers on foot or horseback carried the news of victory to distant city-states. Despite these shifts in delivery and intent, the physical requirements of the athlete remained constant. The physiology of the human body, the accumulation of lactic acid, the depletion of glycogen, and the mechanical stress on the metatarsals serves as the biological tether between the Bronze Age wrestler and the Victorian sprinter. You feel it too, the heat, the strain, the unrelenting push against the clock. The world has changed, but the sweat remains the same. The roar of the modern stadium, a thunderous percussive wall of sound from 80,000 voices, echoes the ghosts of the past, creating an auditory resonance that collapses the intervening centuries. The metallic tang of sweat and the grit of the track's surface underfoot remain the primary evidence of the struggle. The site of ancient Olympia remains a quiet, protected monument, yet its spirit has been exported to the glass and steel arenas of the contemporary world. The cycle of the Olympiad continues, a bridge of sweat and stone across 3 millennia. Listen closely. Can you hear it? Underneath the cheers of the present, the rhythmic slap of bare feet on sand still echoes from the past. You are the witness to this continuity. From the sacred groves of Zeus to the floodlit ceremonies of today, the pursuit of human limits transcends time. The stadium is no longer just a place, it is a memory that breathes. As the sun sets on the Panathenaic marble, the transition is complete. The torch is lit not for a god, but for the human spirit. The games have returned, and they belong to you now. The journey of the athlete remains the ultimate testament to our shared history.